Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached Tom, here to review the movie Atone. So, we begin this movie following this mother character who is this badass woman stepping up to fights. She seems to later on in the movie be working for some sort of agency. Her name is Laura. This movie also features WWE superstar Shamus as one of the antagonists. And so we follow her as she looks after her daughter, Kate, and she's trying to get her to school, and all the while she goes to where her new job is. She's prepping up, essentially. So we see a brief cut of Shamus, or his character, which I don't know if he's ever named in the movie, so I'm just going to refer to him as Shamus for the purposes of simplicity and getting over with the recap stuff. So he moves along, getting ready for his little setup heist with among all these other masked individuals. So, it cuts back to Laura still prepping up Kate for school, meeting up with some businessman, again, getting ready for that job. She briefly talks about her old job, and she meets up with some security people who we don't really get to know all too much. So after her little, what's it called? Little, visit around the area. She's left outside. She heads outside to essentially take a smoke, and she's having this flashback moment of what she used to do. All the while, she's conveniently gone outside at the same time. This little heist is now taking place. These masked men are going in and shooting the security guards we just met, and showing how the footage is being hacked into and all this stuff is happening. So Laura is kind of getting ready to head back in, but she sees that the doors are locked and then starts to move into a separate area. So Laura manages to rush her way inside. Literally, I forgot if the door she was going into was about to be locked or if they forgot to lock it, or anyway, she manages to barge her way inside somehow. I forgot, let's just say she barges her way inside. And one of the guards inside, one of the supposed good guards that are protecting these church, because the place that they're invading is this church place. So essentially, these guys are heisting a church for some reason that we do not know yet. It seems at least at the beginning, it seems to be about money, but there is a bit more to it, as we come to know. So, they show that, that these people have done some terrible things, killed people, blah blah blah. So Laura is peeking around, spying around, and then hearing shots being fired all around. She starts to run away, and she sees this ribbon on the floor, and starts to call out for Kate, her daughter. Apparently, Kate, at some point in the just happened to come back, apparently. I'm assuming it had to have happened as soon as Kate left, because otherwise this makes no sense. That is the only explanation as to how Kate could have ended up back there, and then she said that she wanted to be there. So she have had to had gone straight there before the takeover happened because of all the locked doors, obviously. So a bit of a potential plot hole there if that is not the case. But anyways, so yes, the daughter did end up there, and Laura starts to make her way around, taking out some of these goons, as it were. And we sort of get a glimpse of our main masked man, who wants one of these people in this room. There's like, I want to say 4 or 5 of them, including this lead churchman. There was someone related to Laura. I believe it was like her father or her uncle or something like that. So essentially there's those 2, and then there's like a few other people. I guess they're like a part of the church guys' congregation, if it were. One of them happened to have known like this little secret like bank account that apparently this main church guy had. So anyways, Laura's making her way through, sort of fighting off when she has to. At one point she talks to the leader through this like little watch thing. I guess that's how they were communicating earlier. And there's always like these groups of people, the bad guys, looking around, usually in groups of 2. And she gets visited by this innocent guy, this bigger gentleman, who sort of stumbles his way in, and then he gets her to like talk about herself to him. And also conveniently, she sort of explains like what she is still doing here. She's obviously looking for her daughter. She gives away her name. It doesn't really play into anything, unfortunately. You know, they could have potentially like had the villain and her have a bit of more of a thing going on towards the end, but that doesn't really seem to happen, unfortunately. But anyways, so they're moving on about more bad guys. There sure are a lot of them, and so she does keep moving. She sort of leaves the other guy behind. So anyways, we cut to Shamus and the main bad guy, because Shamus is like semi-main bad guy, I guess. And they're at odds with each other, because he has like this sort of intent of like why they are there, and the main bad guy says like there's like a bigger reason to why they are there. So meanwhile, Laura is still being followed by this innocent guy while she's looking for Kate, and Kate does end up finding her, or vice versa. So she kind of wants to leave at this point, wanting the police to essentially handle the rest. And more and more bad guys, to how convenient, 2 more bad guys start to fire when they see Laura making her way out. She's able, once again, to take them down. So the main bad guy is like questioning this churchman about these people who essentially used to work or be under his congregation, essentially, and how these people were essentially ripped off or ignored throughout their experiences, essentially. And he eventually explains that his mother was like killed, and I guess this is somehow correlated to the church guy. Like, he ignored her, and then like that led to her death or something along these lines, and that's the bigger reason, according to the main bad guy, of why he's doing this. Vengeance, as it were. Laura's uncle, I believe it was her uncle, is killed in the process of the churchman's unwillingness or unknowing nature of like all these Congress under the people under him, essentially, that were left behind. So that happens, and then the main bad guy reveals his face, and meanwhile, everyone is starting to be moved to a different location, to essentially where the bad guys are going to meet up with them. And Shamus and takes out this like other guy, and the earlier security guard, the main one that was with them, what was his name, Xander? He essentially says that he wants to join in on this little operation that they got going on, because he's like that pissed at the church guy. So Laura and her innocent bystander are moving along, and she eventually bumps into or like one of the people steps up to like Shamus, I believe. It was the innocent guy. He's like, I'll deal with Shamus. So meanwhile, Laura essentially moves the daughter to this like air duct that allows for her to get outside. So she tells the daughter to essentially go to the cops, move to the cops, tell them what's going on. Meanwhile, the Xander moves towards the main villain and says like, I want to join you, and then the main villain is talking with the church man about why he's doing this. And he essentially wants the church man to essentially admit to his lack of doing things to all of his congregation. And to get this done, he essentially had all these several bombs placed throughout the building, and would blow even himself up just to get this confession. So Shamus goes on the hunt for Laura, because he's like one of the last like bad guys remaining. They bump into each other. She gets him to drop his guns and fight her fist to fist. She starts off pretty good, and then she eventually grabs her hairpin and then stabs him in the back. When he gets up, she takes the guns that he had dropped and picks them up and proceeds to just shoot him in the head. She moves on ahead and kind of is moving towards the main bad guy at this point, who is essentially still getting that confession done and done with. So the main bad guy says that the money that was associated with, the money that was initially being taken was going to be split among those who were wronged. So even with all that bad intent, there was a little smidge of good deep down in there. So, for all it was worth, I think that the villain actually was pretty well handled, all things considered. A bad guy through and through, but had a good intention somewhere in there, making him a semi-more relatable character, rather than just being doing this just for money's sake, which would be a little bit more one-dimensional, but, you know, if they could make it understandable. But they gave him that extra layer, so good on this movie for giving the villain at least this additional reason for doing something bad. So Laura catches up with the innocent guy who got shot, says their goodbyes. She eventually leaves the same way after their fight. Obviously, her and the main bad guy do get out. She obviously wins with actually the help of the innocent guy. He ends up being the one who shoots the main bad guy, and then because he was already dying anyway. So Laura gets out the same way. She goes to that duct that leads out. She runs off. The bomb blows up. The bombs blow off. We see that the mother was still running in a location. But before she had left, she did get a chance to say goodbye to her. Either again, I think it was her uncle, but I kind of kept going back and forth in my notes. I do apologize if I got that wrong. If it is her father, anyway, I do apologize. Anyway, the timer seemed to conveniently slow down for that moment, and then, you know, the whole building obviously blows up and she is out. And then it proceeds to Laura talking about, you know, getting back into it, her life, and thinking of the churchman, main, you know, him, before, like, what she understood of him, like, when he was apparently at his best, and thinking about that. And she says, like, the moral, or at least her personal moral, that you live on, like, your life, you live so that a part of you never dies. And I think that I know that that moral has been around, but I don't know the last time I personally seen it, so it was nice to see something like that again, I suppose. Happens in this review. I don't know, it's been going on. Anyway, so it shows her essentially reuniting with her daughter, and then the movie ends. And that was the movie Atone, and it was a slightly cheesier, like, obviously on a lower budget, although I suppose what budget they did had, they obviously spent on getting WWE Shamus, unless he was, like, willing to do it for, like, whatever. And because you hear the obvious, very obvious, like, sound crunches that they use, that's the only way I can describe it. So there is a bit of cheesiness to it, if you will. I do think that the whole thing about them adding Kate to the story in the middle there was a little bit contrived. I do feel like, again, like, the only way she would have been able to get there if somehow she immediately ran back after she went to school, because and she would have had to have made it there before the robbery or the takeover even started happening. So a little bit of time discrepancy there, but other than that, I think this movie was actually pretty good, surprisingly. The action was fine, and, you know, despite the Kate kind of coming out of nowhere bit, at least that sort of gave the main character more of a reason to be there, more of a reason to essentially take out these guys. Made it a bit more personal on her stake. And again, mentioning once again the bad guy, he had more reasons other than just a singular reason, which I always appreciate when a villain does have more to offer than just the one thing. I'm not saying that it's necessarily always a bad thing, I'm just glad that they were able to essentially give him more of something to attribute to than it just being it's all about the money. So, action being solid, just a minor, like, little hiccup with the whole time thing. Despite that, I think it's still a solid movie. I think I would give it a solid 7 out of 10. I think it reached there for me. I enjoyed it, despite its one or more obvious flaw of that. I thought everything else was fine as it was. Other than that, yeah, that was my review of the movie Atone. And if you enjoyed this review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One of them will head you over to my Discord server. Please feel free to join. And the other will send you over to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated. And until next time, everyone. Oh, hold on. my mouse is being weird, and I gotta... There we go. And until next time, everyone, bye-bye.